Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Today we're going to start talking about one of the special senses, that is olfaction. Olfaction or smell and taste are both considered chemical senses, which means the stimulus is a chemical substance that will bind to a receptor. Sensory receptors for smell are located in the olfactory epithelium, which is in the superior nasal cavity, covering the inferior part of the cribriform plate. Olfactory epithelium consists of three types of cells. The first type is the olfactory receptor cell. As you see, it's a bipolar neuron. With this part, the dendrite has like a swelling at the end, like a knob, with cilia coming out of it. And the other end, the axons will pass through the cribriform plate to the olfactory bulb to synapse with the second order neurons. This is an electron microscope showing the olfactory receptor cell, which is a first order neuron in this case. Here is the dendrite and non-motile cilia coming out of it. The olfactory receptor proteins are present here on the cilia. The second type of cell located in the olfactory epithelium is called supporting cell or sustentacular cell, which is columnar epithelial cell that contains secretory granules and had a microvilli. The third type of cell is the basal cell. That is the stem cell responsible for regeneration of these olfactory receptor cells almost every 2 to 3 months. Olfactory epithelium also contains glands that secrete mucus. This is very important, covering the cilia that contains the receptor proteins. So, in order for any substance to be smelled, it has to have two conditions. First, it has to be volatile, which means it can move from the air through the nasal cavity to the olfactory epithelium, or the other way around, it can come from the mouth. While you are eating food, some of these molecules, the volatile molecules, will come up through the pharynx to the olfactory epithelium. This is not enough to be smelled. The substance has to be also water soluble or slightly water soluble in order to be dissolved in this mucus layer so it can bind to the receptor. That means that there are substances that we cannot smell. For example, the natural gas. But it is very important for us, for a safety reason, in case of leak of gas, to smell it. So the companies, they add methyl mercaptan. These molecules, 1 trillionth of a gram is enough for us to be in a concentration that's enough for us to smell it. In general, the smell sensation or the olfaction is very sensitive. It has low threshold, which means only few molecules are needed from that substance to be sensed and to be smelled. Okay, now let's follow this cute cupcake in the journey of smell. The odorant molecules will come all the way through the nasal cavity up until the olfactory epithelium. Once reached the olfactory epithelium, it will dissolve in the mucus layer. Then it will bind to a specific receptor on the cilia that's present here. You can see here that we have many types of olfactory receptor cells. Each one of them have different olfactory receptor proteins present on the cilia. We have about 1,000 olfactory receptor proteins in our bodies that allow us to sense like tens of thousands of different odorants, which means for each substance it has like to activate different combinations of different olfactory receptor proteins. For example, this vanilla cupcake will activate these two cells, whereas if it's a chocolate cupcake, that will activate, for example, this cell and the third one. So that's how we perceive it as different odorants. Now the odorant will bind to a receptor on the cilia to start the olfactory transduction pathway. Once bound to a receptor, it will activate this signal transduction pathway. The receptor type for olfaction is a G protein coupled receptor, as you see here. Once bound to the molecule, it will activate adenylyl cyclase, increase the concentration of cyclic AMP, which will activate cation channels, mainly sodium, will enter more positive charges. N means depolarization, that will generate a receptor potential. If it reaches the threshold, then an action potential will be generated in this olfactory epithelial cell and will be propagated up until the olfactory bulb. Now the signal will go up through the axons of the olfactory cells, through the holes of the cribriform plate, up until the olfactory bulb, where they do synapse with the second order neurons that are called the mitral cells in clusters called glomeruli. You can see here that different combinations of olfactory cells will synapse on different mitral cells, and that will give us the perception or the sensation of different odorants. This graph is not as simple as this because it's not only the olfactory cells synapsing with the mitral cells. There are so many interneurons in between, such as the periglomerular cells, there are tufted cells, there are so many other types of cells that functions are not very well understood, but most of them will have a role in what we learned before about the lateral inhibition. Now, mitral cells will project to higher centers in the CNS as an olfactory tract. It will go to the base of the brain. There it will divide into medial and lateral tracts. Now the olfactory tract will divide into two tracts. One will go to the medial olfactory area and the other to the lateral olfactory area. The medial olfactory area is located anterior to the hypothalamus, and there are connections going to the hypothalamus and the limbic system. Therefore, it is mainly concerned with the basic behavior associated with the smell, such as lip licking, salivation, gastric secretion in response to smelling something. Whereas the lateral olfactory area is kind of more advanced, so this area is associated more with the limbic system, more specifically with the hippocampus. That means it's related to the learning associated with olfaction. For example, when you learn how to like or dislike something just based on the smell and your previous experiences. Lateral olfactory area is associated with what we call it the paliocortex. This is the only part of the cortex that receives sensory information without passing through the thalamus first. There is also a new one that sends information, a new track to the cerebral cortex that's related to the perception of the olfaction. However, it's not very well understood. Finally, you all know that olfactory receptors are rapidly adapting receptors, which means we stop smelling something after a second, maybe less, more, and this is the function of the adaptation at the receptor level. But some studies also suggest that there is an adaptation at the central nervous system level through sending negative feedback messages from the CNS to the olfactory bulb. That's it for now. Thank you.